So if you've been feeling disoriented by everything that's going on, everything is crazy right now, you're not alone, and there's good reason for this. And I just want to share like my own story to start because I've been feeling that too. I mean, it's not like I have it all figured out and I know everything. This whole thing I'm doing here, this channel, is about an exploration of like who we really are, who I really am, and sharing that exploration, doing science in the true meaning of the word science, which is about exploring our world and like what it's all about for real. And right now is super disorienting. And I think there's the reason why that it's super crazy at this time is because we have been trained to be so, wow, look, my hair is going like straight up. That's crazy. Anyway, we've been trained by our system of education and our system of like science and all of that to really have this attitude like we know most things. Like we're so smart, we're so advanced, we're so technological that we have it mostly figured out. Like maybe there's some little things that we don't know, but we have it mostly figured out. And we have this really bad relationship with the unknown. Like current science, current academia, the stewards of knowledge, are not friends of the true unknown. I mean, if you talk about small unknowns like incremental advancements beyond what current science says, or minor tweaks to what science believes and academia believes, then that's fine. That's all good. That's all part of, the daily thing is like the incremental nature of it. But when it comes to big unknowns, big mysteries, like where did we really come from? Or, what's going on in the world? Or what is the deeper meaning of energy or soul or spirit? Like, does that exist? Or are there other beings out there that we may someday soon interact with? I mean, all of that stuff, we have a really bad relationship with that because we're taught that it's mostly known. Like the textbooks make it sound like, here's what we know. Here's exactly what we know. We're so logical. We're so rational. I was recently talking to a scientist who's a client. I help people with like grant proposals when they're in science. And that's how they get the money to do the science. And one of the things that people struggle with the most is the unknown. In other words, when they have to come up with an idea that comes from the imagination, comes from in here, and put it onto the page and advocate for this imagined thing that they might do in the future, they really struggle because it's like, well, but I don't have data. I don't have proof. I can't prove that I'm right about this. And it's like, yeah, that's the whole reason you're writing a grant proposal is so that you can get the money to test the theory and test the idea, test the model that you have, right? That's the whole idea. But it's like, it's ingrained in our system to be uncomfortable with that because textbooks present everything as nice, neat packages. Take the example of the discovery of DNA, the DNA helix by Rosalind Franklin, Watson, and Crick. And I like to feature Rosalind Franklin because she is the because she was female at the time, she was not appreciated as much as she should have been. But that's a side story. Anyway, so that discovery, like if you read a textbook now, it's like, oh, we know it's a helix, it's all obvious, it sounds so obvious and rational and like it makes sense and it's scientific. And yet, if you look back at what happened back then, there were all sorts of theories about what was going on with DNA. There were people who thought it was a triple helix, people who thought it had total other structures, non-helical. The data was not definitive, and there were lots of experiments to try to figure out what is this structure, and nobody knew. And at the beginning, this idea that it might be a helix was a guess, a pure guess, a fantasy in people's heads that, oh, maybe it has this helix structure. So they had this fantasy, this imagined structure in their minds, and then they went and did long, arduous experiments over the years and ultimately got, the most famous one is called Photo 51. You can look it up on the web. It's a picture that shows a series of blobs that represents the strongest evidence that they had at that point that supported the idea that it was a helix. It was like an X-ray picture taken like vertically looking down the helix, and you can see the blobs, like you can imagine like looking down on it and how that might be a helix. That was like the strongest piece of evidence. So, you know, again, the textbook says, oh, it's all figured out. It's like these nice base pairs and blah, 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 blah. But that was decades of people struggling and imagining and trying to figure it out. And so my point is that, like, the unknown, I think the more we have become advanced digitally and had access to all of this knowledge on Google, the more we are uncomfortable with unknown. Oh, well, there's the hair again. Holy cow. It's like from an unknown space movie where it's like standing. Hopefully I'm not about to be struck by lightning. Anyway, and so it's really hard because if we're all in this idea that most things are known and it's sort of predictable and linear march forward in progress, and then times like this happen where everything seems to be changing and falling apart and unpredictable, and especially in my belief system, in what I have concluded from my decades of doing true science, including the inner subjective science, I believe there's something deep and energetic going on, a big energetic shift happening right now, and that energetic shifts like this always precede the physical manifestation, the physical appearance of those shifts. So that we have actually already undergone a big energetic shift that some of us who are really sensitive to that, like I am, you know, I feel it when that stuff happens. I just feel sick and weird, and I've felt a lot of that this recently, and it's not explained by any virus, because one day I'll be feeling sick like I have a flu, and the next day I'm fine. It's like, oh, everything's good. And then the next day I'm back with that thing again. It's just, and it's up and down, and it's left and right, and it's different symptoms. It's not any consistent thing. And I pick it up, and there are a lot of other people, if you know, are in those circles of people talking about that same thing. Everything from headaches to ears ringing to just feeling disoriented. And it's this disorienting energy that's been happening. And what I understand from downloads I've had, and I've also seen other people with these downloads, is that the physical signs of this are also appearing. Like the things that we are seeing happening in the world, the economy seeming to fall apart, just this whole sort of, if you could call it a war going on. All of these things are just physical appearances of this as things continue to shift and fall apart. And again, my main point here today is just that it's super disorienting. So if you're feeling disoriented, that is probably why. And the number one cure, the number one sort of remedy for this is this idea of surrender. So I'm not good at surrender. So let me explain what I mean by surrender so that you can understand what I'm saying. What I mean by surrender is our minds, again, are pattern recognition machines. That's really what quote reasoning is. It's not that we're actually doing some perfect logical thing. No, we're just recognizing patterns, and from those past patterns trying to predict the future. Well, right now, the past patterns are breaking down. So our ability to use our rational minds to predict what's coming next or what's going to happen is extremely limited. So if you're trying to sit in that rational headspace and think about what's going to happen, what should I do, what comes next, it's hard. And I know it's really a struggle. Like I've really had some anger and frustration about this, trying to figure out what to do, for example, in my business and in, you know, just with lots of things, like with no ability to really predict or know what's coming next or what the world's going to look like within the next year. I suspect it's going to change quite a bit. We're going to see some big changes, but I don't know the details of that, and nobody does. And that's really frustrating to the minds which want to recognize the patterns to try to keep us, quote, safe. But that is not actually safety during these times of chaos. It's not safety to use this linear pattern recognition machine in the head to try to predict what's coming next to keep us, quote, safe, because it can't predict what's coming next in times like this. Just like nobody could predict what's going to happen with my hair in the next 10 seconds as the wind changes here. So that's the thing, is we have to, the idea of surrender is letting go of the need to know. I'm not saying letting go of curiosity. Curiosity, I think, is great. Trying to be curious and have this open, curious approach and mind is fine. It's great. But when that curiosity turns into, I need to know to feel safe and secure, this is not the time in history for that. This is not the time for predictability. So what I mean by surrender is surrendering to this idea that we're going to be carried along on this wave. The wave is here, and whether we like it or not, we're riding the wave. So we can either stand up and surf, or if you're like me, you'd rather be in a kayak, like sitting there surfing, but nonetheless, it's like doing something with that wave, catching it and riding it elegantly, versus being just totally, well, I was going to use the word chundered, which is an old term from kayaking, friends, for when you get like totally circulated in a wave. You're just being thrashed in the wave because you get caught up in it and you're out of control, and it's a very unpleasant experience. And I think that's where we're at in this life, is you can either kind of like fight it and get chundered, again, I'll use that word, get chundered, or you can say, okay, the wave is here, I'm catching it. I'm going to do the best job I can of just staying centered, calm. Meditation is a great thing for this. Taking walks outdoors. Like, I had the great fortune to go skiing yesterday, and I realized that many people do not have that ability. I mean, I was barely able to make it happen, but I did make it happen, and it was just so nice and so centering to get outdoors and to be in an outdoors place like this. And even if you're in a place that doesn't have such beautiful surroundings as this, it's still just getting outside, meditating, centering yourself is so crucial during this time. That's much more important than trying to use the brain to figure it out, because I'm sorry, you can't. Nobody can. We'll figure it out once we've gotten there, and then we'll say, oh, that's what happened. And then maybe we'll write in the textbooks about sounding like we knew it all along, like it was totally figure-outable, and like everything was like, oh, that was obvious, right? Historically. Nice job to go back and make it sound all like everything was so obvious at the time. But it's never obvious when you're in the moment. So let's surrender. That's my suggestion for the day. Surrender and center. 2 suggestions, actually. Surrender and center. So valuable, so important. And then you can be the person riding the wave nice and gently and looking over to the people who are struggling and say, hey, do you want to join me over here? Surfing the wave instead of getting chundered? Much more pleasant riding the wave. And we can only do that by example. So we have to be the examples. All right, I'll leave you with that thought. I got to get going here. I hope you have a good one, and I'd love to hear from you what your experience has been. Has this time been disorienting for you like it has been for me, especially when I try to think about it? It's been a wild up and down ride. So again, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And of course, as always, that thumbs up or the like button is great. It helps get the videos out there. And a subscribe if you want to hear more. Okay, this is Dr. Morgan Giddings. I'll see you later.